On to the next segment, and it's my turn to speak. This actually was something scheduled for the penultimate speech of today, but due to the reshuffling, we've moved this forward. What I'll be presenting on is the currently active cooperation at a very much working level between the EU and Korea. And in particular, two other FP7 projects that are going on in terms of policy support and cooperative support at national and funding body levels. And then lastly, to just give some brief information on our activities within the Eureka Network, which this event is being partnered with today. So the first project I'd like to speak to you about is Corridor. So Corridor is a project focusing on the stimulation and the facilitation of the participation, there's a lot of shuns in there, of European researchers in Korean R&D programs. Kiat is a member of this project, but ultimately what this project fits within the Access for EU initiative. This is an initiative being run by the European Commission with a target of 11 different countries, and within each of those countries to generate an understanding of how the funding mechanisms and international cooperation mechanisms work within each of those target countries, and then to feed this information back to the researchers in the EU, and to make these structures and funding mechanisms in the target countries more available and more accessible to European researchers. So it's to increase this awareness and this dissemination of information to the EU from the countries that are being targeted. As I mentioned, there are 11 countries. Korea is one, and actually two of our other partners within the Eurasia PAT project, Australia and New Zealand, are also countries within this group of 11. And you can see here the website. There's plenty of information there, and I do encourage you to access this. And just before I go into a little more detail, this project is, if you like, a flip side to an earlier project run that I think has now come to a conclusion, or is coming to a conclusion within FP7, called KESTCAP. And KESTCAP was doing the same kind of work, but returning the information the other way. So KESTCAP was a consortium made up of the National Research Foundation and the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology, together with the Korea Institute for Science and Technology's Europe campus in Germany, and together they were collecting the information on how Europeans could access the funding initiatives available in Europe. And so this project, if you like, is the flip side of what that initial KESCAP project was being done. So what is the significance of the cooperation between Korea and the EU at the moment, and why do we need these types of programs in order to encourage such cooperation? The first and by far the most obvious in light of the recent developments with the free trade agreement is that Korea is the EU's fourth largest trading partner outside of Europe, and in return the EU is the second largest trading partner for Korea, ahead of the US, just a bit after China. But so you can see that at a strategic level this is incredibly important. And so why should we be looking at developing a European and a Korean cooperation, but from a European perspective? So largely this is to help encourage and develop European competitiveness in certain fields of science and technology, ICT obviously being the most key of these, and then to together address the global challenges within these international relationships that we have. Issues given, examples given here such as climate change and terrorism, and then to be able to work together to address the areas of common need, common interest, and common policy and strategy. And then lastly, to encourage further S&T cooperation and to co-develop policies for the development of both regions. So to the Corridor Consortium, There is 5 of us. The coordinator is, again, the Korea Institute for Science and Technology's Europe campus in Saarbrücken, Germany. And then our other European partners are the DLR, which is the German Aerospace Agency under the Federal Ministry for Education and Research in Germany, and CNRS from France. They are our 2 European partners. And then from Korea, to reflect the sharing of R&D responsibilities within Korea, we have KIAT, and we also have the National Research Foundation. So for those of you who obviously for the Koreans amongst us, they understand perhaps this split a little better, but for the others, there is this sharing of R&D, science and technology activities here in Korea, with early and fundamental sciences generally funded by MEST, and then applied and commercial technology development funded and supported by MKE. And so this overall aim in Corridor is to develop the common areas of research interest, and then perhaps more importantly is to provide information on the funding mechanisms that are available here in Korea that European researchers can access. As mentioned a little earlier on by our director at MKE, KIAT itself opened up a program last year whereby we have funding available to international partners of MKE-funded projects, and in some instances we even allow and encourage foreign organizations to be the lead in these programs. And we're now seeing, through colleagues at MEST and at NRF that I know, we're now seeing similar initiatives being run by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technology. And then the objectives are to collect this available information and to map it into a format that makes it accessible to the European community of researchers, and then to facilitate the participation of those European researchers through the generation of a help desk based in Europe at KIST Europe that will give and provide information and support to interested European potential participants, and then generally to raise awareness for these opportunities. So the 3 overall strategies covered by Corridor, firstly, is the mapping initiative that I spoke to you, and that will be covered during the first major work package. And then probably the most important is the networking, is this dissemination and liaison building activity. Here, generally conventional dissemination tools such as the Access for EU website, at the Corridor section there, flyers and brochures, websites, participation, connection with other FP7 projects, but then these will all obviously feed through into this central Access for EU initiative dissemination process. And then capacity building, to work together to identify and influence the regulatory and organizational problems and changes, and then to again raise the awareness for European researchers. And here you can see just a basic overview of how the program is organized, how the different work packages feed into this ultimate Access for EU platform that will be combining the results of all of 11 of these individual projects within the greater initiative. And here you can see a little more detail on the description of the work program tasks. I'm not going to go into those in too much detail, but you can see this is a fairly standard setup for an FP7 project, but you can see some of the deliverables and some of the milestones that are needed to achieve during the process of this project. Key to any FP7 project are the reports that are generated. And here you can see 3 of the reports that are now in preparation for delivery, 2 for this month and 1 for July. And probably the most important is the first one there, this access opportunities for European researchers in Korean research technology and development programs. And then a participation guideline, which I know has already been submitted and should probably be available very soon via the website. I know that because I had the pleasure of editing the document. And then the final frequently asked questions document to assist anybody who's interested in participating within this program. We've had several events, as in Eurasia Pack. We've had a number of workshops in Corridor. We've had a number of workshops as well, together with a number of info days, based both here in Korea and also most recently last month in Bonn and Paris, where researchers from the EU were gathered together to assess their interest in participation with Korea and to get feedback from the research community based there. And then we have the online services, our websites and our help desks. Here you can see the team members of the Corridor program, and there you can see I'm lucky enough to be also sitting in on this consortium as well. I very much enjoy my time, as with Eurasia Pack, I very much enjoy my time working within this program, and we do see it as something very important towards the development of a closer understanding between what Europe and Korea wants to achieve, but more, and how we can encourage a network between the research communities of the two regions. If you'd like to get in contact with the coordinator of the project, this is Dr. Sang-won Kim, as I mentioned, based at KIST in Europe, Saarbrücken. And by all means, I'm sure he'd be very happy if he received a few emails from you. The second project, and it's slightly bigger, is one called Coronet. Now, this is something. This is a project happening within the IRINET system, in particular with Korean participation. There are a number of these IRINET activities happening. I think there are 8 at the moment. These are all collecting information again from interesting partner countries to the EU. For example, Russia, Canada, South Africa, Balkan states and areas such as these. And here what we're trying to do is actually to create a project which actually strengthens the S&T cooperation. So here we're not just talking about identifying at a policy level the intentions of the members of the project, but actually running joint thematic calls within the program itself to kickstart this cooperative process for the generation of smaller projects that will hopefully then lead to larger FP7, full FP7 projects in the future. So we're funded by the 7th Framework Programme, and those other through the Capacities Programme and the IRINET initiative. We have a budget there of about 2.4 million euros. Now, this is quite large for an international sort of cooperation project within FP7, but that's because a biggest portion of this money is actually set aside for the funding of projects within these joint calls being launched by Coronet. It's a 4-year project due to finish in December next year, and the coordinator is again DLR in Germany, the International Bureau of the BMBF in the German Aerospace Center. The consortium is 11 partners from 10 countries, and here I can say Kiat actually is not a full member of the consortium, but we have joined and been invited to join as an observer of this project. So I'm part of the 3 guys we have working at Kiat who are observers of this project. And as we're not able to contribute as fully as our Korean colleagues at NRF, what we do try and do is support through the provision of documentation and information that can then be used to be disseminated to the other members. So here you can see the various organizations throughout Europe. So you can see that just through the consortium, there is a particularly strong interest in working with Korean researchers throughout Europe. And you can see there is a good number of observers who, for example, the Royal Society in the UK, Research Council of Norway, and then Kiat itself. And so while there are not a larger number of consortium members, there are a lot of people watching this project with great interest in order to determine whether or not they can help participate in the future. So the objectives. So the first is this issue of promoting the cooperation to integrate the research communities between Korea and the EU. And in order to do this, it's fundamental that you improve the exchange of information available between the two regions. Next is to look at the best practices, to look at the practices done here in Korea, perhaps by, predominantly by MEST as the main consortium member, but also by looking at the mechanisms and the policies that are working throughout the other members of the consortium, and to exchange that information so that other areas of Europe are perhaps able to see what Korea is doing and perhaps modify or integrate practices that are being performed here in Korea, but then in return for Korea to be identifying things that are being done within ministries and funding agencies in other countries, and to perhaps adopt those and modify them in a suitable way to be used for Korean researchers. And then an analysis of further developing cooperation mechanisms and interests is done. And then specifying specific thematic areas for cooperation within the project. So I've mentioned that there are these joint calls, and I'll be giving a little more information in a moment. Developing and implementing concepts for joint Korean-European programs. A large part of what this CoroNet project is going to be doing is, through the practice of these joint calls in this program, is identifying ways that we can create perhaps a specific FP7 joint call with Korea in the future, and how this would need to be strategized and planned in order to make it as effective as possible. And then lastly is just to generally increase Korean participation in the FP7 program. Alvis has already mentioned there in one of his slides that actually Korea, in terms of just Asia Pacific region, we lag quite far behind countries such as China, Japan, even the Philippines, Malaysia and Taiwan. And this is perhaps exacerbated, again, as Alvis highlighted, by the fact that Korea is not generally eligible to receive funding from the European Commission for FP7. However, as has also already been mentioned, there are now those funding mechanisms available through the two ministries here in Korea that does promote the participation and the support of Korean participation in FP7. So here you can see a little overview of the way that the CoroNet program has been split down into its various work packages through analysis, monitoring, review, strategy and foresight, joint funding, joint activities, and then the ubiquitous management work package that you'll see in absolutely any FP7 project. So the deliverables that have been given so far has been a SWOT analysis of the drivers and barriers to cooperation. And this, I think, is particularly pertinent, again, to an issue raised by Alvis, where there is a significant issue in terms of the geographical distance between Korea and the EU in order for effective communication to happen. There is also a language barrier. I'm happy to say that during my nearly 10 years in Korea, the English language has dramatically improved, and I'm sure that this will be a significantly easing factor for the cooperation between Korea and EU in the near future. And then also a report on the internationalization patterns and the scientific collaboration. So a large part of this project was a mapping exercise done to see and have a look at the FP7 projects that have already been existing, to map out which technology fields that they were in, to see to try and identify again the common interests between the FP7 and between the EU and Korea in FP7. And then finally, an inventory of national funding programs. So there is some crossover between what Corridor and CoroNet is trying to do. As I mentioned, there was pilot joint calls within this project. The first done in 2010 was in lifelong health. There was a significant amount of interest. It was done through a common pot system, with the Korean providing a matching fund from our side. The call budget was just short of €1 million, which, considering that's, if you like, several projects within a larger project, is quite impressive. And this was generally done to generate mobility in researchers between the two regions, and to allow them just to travel and explore, to make partnerships, to identify networks, and to just generally find a way of integrating the two research communities. So you can see that per project, the actual amount wasn't very much, but it's very, very useful. Any European researcher will tell you that money absolutely is key to anything. And so while €20,000 generally wouldn't go very far in terms of research equipment or materials, just by being able to spend that money on a few aircraft tickets, to attend meetings, to attend workshops, both here in Korea and in Europe, is key to the development of a network that will lead to future developments. So 14 projects were supported out of 28 proposals, and this was just the first call. Before I speak about these events, I will say that there are now in discussion this year, later this year, there will be, actually just next week, there will be a workshop in Venice that will begin the process of discussing the second of the joint calls within the Coronet project. And two of the areas that are currently being discussed are new and renewable energies and clean technology. And the other one, while it hasn't been more specifically laid out, is probably going to be closely related to ICT. So I've been informed, but this information will be made available later in the year. So there have been several events throughout Europe and here in Korea. And, oh, yes, so this weekend in Venice, actually. I'm not going into next week. And then further events, again, coming up both in Korea and Europe throughout the remainder of this year, and then into next as the project comes to a close. The primary contact point is based at DLR in Germany, Miss Marion Steinberger. She also is our German partner within the Corridor project, so you can see that there is a very close integration of interest just within the consortium members, and she would probably be more than happy if you had any requests for information perhaps about the upcoming joint call. Okay, so I'm kind of back in my more familiar territory. Of course, I work within the FP7 projects that Kiat is working with, but I will say that primarily my role within Kiat is for our participation within the Eureka network. But I'm not going to go into too much detail. I'm sure most of you have already been next door, either yesterday or hopefully not today, but yesterday you were there. And the Eureka network represents a very strong opportunity for Korea to extend the work that's being done by FP7 into a much more commercial and marketable environment. And I wanted to just highlight some brief overviews on the history of our participation in Eureka and just some of the collaborative activities that have already happened. Just a brief overview, if you like. So in terms of history, we've only actually been an associate country of the Eureka network since 2009. But before that, all the way back in 2005, an exploratory mission was sent to Europe in order to begin this process of finding out whether the Eureka network would be interested in having a partner from Asia and from so far away. There have been other non-European associate member countries of Eureka, not so many of them, but Korea approaching Eureka was the first time that they had started seriously considering an Asian partner within the network. So in 2007, whilst we were still considered a third country, we began the funding of 7 projects. And then to the current day, whereas as of the end of December last year, we now have 24 projects that have either been funded and then completed successfully or that are ongoing at the moment. And we actually expect this number to probably grow to somewhere just over 30 projects in total by the end of 2011. And there you can see that, that forecasted total of around 34 projects. That is an ideal number. We certainly have the funding as long as we share the money right to do this. But you can also see that from the MKE point of view, this has now become a significantly important network for us. And just within this last year, you can see that our budget has risen from just over €3.25 billion to, sorry, €3.25 million, that would have been a very large number, €3.25 million up to almost €5 million, and this budget will be increasing again next year to support even further projects, and I can say that during a discussion recently at one of the numerous European cooperation seminars that we did, that there was a very interesting comment from our director Kim from MKE, who said that there is the intention of MKE to extend their support for R&D to be 10% of the overall MKE budget by 2015. So we can see at KIAT that this is definitely going to feed through to our funding for Eureka, but also to FP7. And this is why I included it here today. Pretty much, what, 80%, 70% of our projects are ICT related. There's two reasons for this. Obviously, Korea's reputation within the ICT global community, highly recognized and highly valued. And also because from the Korean side, there is a greater interest, at least at the commercial and corporate level, in European cooperation in ICT fields. And so with 16 projects in ICT, and I can tell you we have 5 more to add already at the beginning of this year in various areas of software, hardware and telecommunications development. There is a very, very significant ICT impact within the Eureka network involving Korea. But we do try and share this through to other thematic areas, but the ICT area definitely has the strongest interest. And you can see here in relationship to the other countries, we've only been in there for 2 years, really as a full member, but only really been funding projects since 2007. And so we do have a long way to go, and we also appreciate that we are not going to perhaps reach the heights of Spain or Netherlands, my colleagues here from these two countries. But we do see ourselves as, in the future, significantly adding to what we're already doing within this network, and we are providing the support services to make work within Eureka significantly easier for Koreans. And I think this is, these next two slides I quite like the data here. It's very simple data, but it's quite poignant data. So you can see here that of the 24 projects that we're involved with, we've already worked with over half of the countries in Europe. And so in particular, obviously, with the top 4 or 5. But already just within these 24 projects, the networks are being built. And then I can show you in the next slide here what we have begun calling the Inno network at KIAT. Within these 24 projects, there are 49 project partners from Spain and 45 project partners from France and 12 from the Netherlands that I also already mentioned. And generally what we find and what we've been told by European partners is that Eureka is often the kickstart to a deeper European cooperation for Korean organizations and research institutes, and that just a single Eureka project will often then spill over into several further Eureka projects and then into FP7 as the relationships and the networks grow through the cooperation within these projects. So this, to us, we see as a way of feeding into FP7 on a longer term basis. So that just concludes a very brief overview of the current projects that we're doing in order to support international cooperation. I've taken enough time, I think, but if there's any questions, please come and find me afterwards.